In a quiet Houston apartment, a mother of 3 was starting over. Her name was Jackelyn Wilson. She had just ended a long relationship. She removed her ex-boyfriend's things from her apartment. It seemed like a new chapter was beginning. But just 2 days later, everything changed. It was early morning on October 2nd, 2024. Her children were getting ready for the day. Suddenly, her ex-boyfriend, Howard Ruffin, showed up. He wasn't invited. Jackelyn didn't call him. She had told him to leave her alone. But that didn't stop him. He came into the apartment. A loud argument broke out. Then came the worst part, gunshots. Several. Fast. Her children heard it all. Some of them saw it. Imagine being a child and watching your mother get shot. Neighbors heard the shots. But by the time help arrived, Jackelyn was already badly wounded. Her children ran for help, but it was too late. She was gone. She was only 32 years old. Police say the whole attack lasted less than 30 seconds. But it destroyed a family forever. After shooting her, Ruffin ran away. He later turned himself in. Now, he faces murder charges. What led to this? Why didn't anyone stop it? And what signs were there before it got this far? This story is not just about one woman. It's about what happens when warning signs are ignored. It's about how fast domestic violence can turn deadly. This is the story of Jackelyn Wilson. Welcome to True Crime Diaries, the place where we uncover shocking stories, unsolved cases, and deep mysteries from the world of crime. From real events to breakthroughs in investigation, we break it all down so you can see what really happened. Before we begin, don't forget to tap the subscribe button. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? Drop your thoughts as this story unfolds. Your opinion counts. These are real people, real events, and serious lessons we must not ignore. Share this video with someone you care about. It could make a difference, maybe even save a life. Let's get started. On the morning of October 2nd, 2024, the atmosphere inside apartment 217 at Willow Green was routine. Jackelyn Wilson had already begun her day. Her children were present, preparing for school. The sounds of breakfast, soft footsteps, and a typical weekday morning filled the small space. There was no warning that this would be the last time her voice would echo through those walls. At approximately 8:07 a.m., the front door opened. Howard Ruffin entered. There were no forced signs of entry, suggesting he either still had access or was let in during a brief moment of hesitation. The interaction between the two escalated quickly. According to early reports, loud voices were heard by neighbors through the thin apartment walls. The argument was sharp, short, and explosive in volume. Within moments, multiple gunshots were fired. The shots rang out across the hallway. At least one child was in the room when it happened.
A woman says she heard a man threaten to kill her neighbor just days ago.
And when she saw the police tape, her worst fears came true. We told you about the brutal murder last night. The victim was killed in front of her own kids at their home on the Northwest Side.
And the suspect has since turned himself in. ABC 13's Nick Guttario is live downtown with what we've learned about him. Nick.
Howard Ruffin will soon face a judge for this murder charge. He was actually supposed to appear in court today for a separate family violence charge involving the same victim. He didn't appear. However, this is a pattern of family violence that neighbors say they saw and worried would escalate. What happened inside this Northwest Houston apartment has left neighbors in shock.
It's just like painful, I guess. Like my heart hurts. That's what I could say that. My heart hurts about it.
On Wednesday morning, a doorbell camera shows a man enter an apartment. Seconds later, you hear shouting and 9 gunshots. Witnesses told ABC 13 the victim's 2 children were inside. They weren't hurt. Her 2 other children were in school.
To be getting ready for school, getting your kids out, and then the monster comes in, you know, and he does that.
We spoke to the victim's neighbor before police made an arrest. She asked us to conceal her identity, terrified the shooter would return. Officers arrested this man, Howard Ruffin. Court documents reveal the victim was Jackelyn Wilson. Neighbors say the two were in a relationship. Earlier this week, they say Wilson tossed Ruffin's stuff out.
The only one time that I heard him, and I want to say within the last week, is when he says, okay, I'm going to kill you.
Documents reveal Ruffin's faced multiple family assault charges. 3 years ago, Ruffin was convicted in Walker County for assaulting a family member. 2 years ago, he was charged in Harris County for hitting and strangling Wilson. Prosecutors asked for a protective order, but but she never got it. It's because despite the warrant, he wasn't arrested in Harris County. We've learned Ruffin was arrested in western Texas. It's unclear why. However, in Maverick County, officials granted him a bond for the Harris County assault charge. Officials here say they didn't learn about the bond for 16 months and only discovered it days ago. Now, prosecutors are asking a judge to deny bail for the murder charge.
But if he's in custody, he needs to stay there. Do not give him bail, and I wish and pray that he does not.
Others were in nearby rooms. The entire exchange lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, Jackelyn lay motionless, bleeding from several wounds. Her children immediately fled the apartment, seeking help from neighbors in a state of confusion and shock. The 911 call came in fast. Houston police and EMS responded shortly after. Officers arrived to find the apartment door open and signs of a violent struggle inside. Jackelyn was unresponsive. Despite efforts from first responders, she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her body was later removed under a white sheet, while neighbors stood silently nearby, watching as authorities documented the scene. Ruffin was no longer at the complex by the time police arrived. A warrant was issued almost immediately for his arrest. Surveillance footage from the area confirmed he had left the scene in a black sedan. Hours later, he turned himself into the Houston Police Department and was officially charged with murder. No further resistance was reported during his surrender. The apartment was sealed for evidence collection. Crime scene investigators worked through the morning, gathering shell casings, analyzing blood spatter, and photographing the interior. Items were removed in bags, and the unit remained taped off for over 24 hours. Other residents were questioned but offered limited information. Some admitted they had heard arguments before, but none expected it would come to this. The children were placed in the care of relatives. Their lives forever changed. The complex itself became quiet in the days that followed, marked by caution tape and candlelight. The hallway where it all happened became a silent corridor of grief and disbelief. A routine morning had become a deadly encounter. One mother was gone, and 3 young children would now live with the final minutes of October 2nd permanently etched into their memory. Following the deadly incident inside Jackelyn Wilson's apartment, law enforcement launched an immediate search for Howard Ruffin. Witness statements and nearby surveillance helped officers quickly identify his vehicle and confirm his departure from the complex. His name was entered into the police system, and an official murder warrant was issued within hours. By midday on October 2nd, 2024, Ruffin appeared at a Houston area police station and turned himself in. His surrender was quiet and without resistance. Investigators interviewed him upon arrival, while officers processed him into custody. He was formally booked on charges of murder and held at the Harris County Jail pending his court appearance. The speed of his arrest prevented further risk to the public. Court documents later revealed that Ruffin had a known history of domestic disputes, though no active restraining order was in place at the time of the shooting. Prosecutors emphasized the deliberate nature of the killing, citing the short time frame between the breakup and the attack. They argued that Ruffin's decision to confront Jackelyn so soon after their separation demonstrated intent. During the initial court hearing, the presiding judge reviewed the evidence presented by prosecutors, which included eyewitness testimony, physical evidence from the scene, and statements made by Ruffin. Bond was denied due to the severity of the charge and concerns about community safety. The state confirmed it would be seeking a full trial and potentially a life sentence if convicted. As the legal process moved forward, the district attorney's office worked closely with law enforcement to ensure that the children involved were not re-exposed to additional trauma during testimony. Victim services were made available to Jackelyn's family, and support staff began preparing for a trial that would likely rely on both forensic data and the first-hand experience of minor witnesses. Meanwhile, defense attorneys began reviewing the police reports and surveillance footage. No plea deal was immediately discussed. Ruffin remained in custody under close supervision, and all communications related to the case were monitored. Media outlets covering the case were asked to avoid publishing sensitive details related to the children or the layout of the crime scene. The judicial calendar scheduled a pretrial hearing within 30 days, and a tentative trial date was set for the following quarter. As proceedings continued, the court sealed certain files to protect the privacy of surviving family members. The state built its case on the timeline, motive, and rapid escalation of violence that led to Jackelyn's death. The legal system now held the responsibility of delivering justice. News of Jackelyn Wilson's death spread quickly throughout the Houston area. Local news stations covered the story within hours of the incident, highlighting the violent nature of the crime and its impact on the community. Neighbors who lived at the Willow Green complex expressed shock, stating that although arguments were sometimes heard, no one anticipated such an outcome. Shortly after the police confirmed Ruffin's arrest, a small group of residents organized a candlelight vigil outside the apartment complex. Flowers, handwritten notes, and photographs were placed near the front steps. Some left stuffed animals in honor of Jackelyn's children. The memorial grew steadily over the following days, drawing attention from both local media and advocacy groups focused on domestic violence prevention. Leaders from several Houston-based nonprofits spoke publicly about the need for stronger protective measures for victims of abuse. Representatives from women's shelters used Jackelyn's case as a reference point to push for better emergency response systems and expanded legal protections. Flyers and resource guides were distributed in the neighborhood to inform residents about available support services. Within Jackelyn's immediate circle, friends and family members began sharing memories on social media. Many described her as a quiet fighter who worked tirelessly for her children. Digital tributes included photos of her with her kids, birthday celebrations, and captions about resilience. The posts were shared widely, often accompanied by messages about the dangers victims face after leaving toxic relationships. Religious leaders in the area also addressed the tragedy during community gatherings. Several pastors dedicated sermons to topics of family violence, accountability, and intervention. Some faith-based groups held prayer services for Jackelyn's children and offered counseling support for those directly affected by the crime. The faith community's involvement created a space for collective reflection and mourning. Lawmakers and city officials took notice as well. A few publicly acknowledged the case and encouraged discussions around prevention. Though no new legislation was immediately introduced, local representatives indicated that they were reviewing current domestic violence protocols in light of the incident. Community meetings were scheduled to allow residents to voice concerns and suggest improvements in response practices. Over time, the neighborhood began to settle, but the memory of what happened remained. Apartment 217 stood quiet, its windows covered and its doors sealed. Conversations around safety, warning signs, and early intervention continued in small circles, workplaces, and schools. Jackelyn Wilson's death became more than just a crime. It became a moment that forced the city to look inward and take notice. The courtroom proceedings began with a formal reading of charges against Howard Ruffin. Prosecutors outlined the sequence of events leading up to Jackelyn Wilson's death and presented initial evidence, including surveillance footage, 911 transcripts, and statements from responding officers. The judge acknowledged the seriousness of the charges and confirmed that the trial would proceed without bond. During pretrial motions, the defense filed several requests, including one to exclude certain witness statements and another to suppress portions of the police interview. The prosecution countered by submitting photographic evidence from the scene and testimony from forensics personnel. The court ruled that all admissible materials would remain part of the case file, and jury selection was scheduled shortly after. Jury selection took 3 days, with attorneys on both sides examining potential jurors' backgrounds and views on domestic violence cases. A full panel was confirmed by the end of the week. Opening arguments were scheduled for the following Monday, with both teams preparing witnesses and finalizing exhibits. Court officials ensured that the identities of minor witnesses remained protected throughout the process. The prosecution began its case by calling first responders to describe what they encountered upon arrival at the scene. Their testimonies focused on the apartment's condition, Jackelyn's injuries, and the children's immediate response. Forensic specialists followed, breaking down the ballistic evidence and confirming the number of shots fired and their trajectories. A key element in the prosecution's argument was the short time frame between the breakup and the attack. Testimony from close friends and a neighbor established that Jackelyn had expressed concern in the days leading up to her death. Text messages and voice recordings supported the claim that she had ended the relationship and asked Ruffin not to return. The defense maintained that Ruffin did not come to the apartment with premeditated intent. They suggested that the situation escalated during a heated argument and framed it as a moment of emotional breakdown. However, prosecutors pointed to the weapon Ruffin brought with him, as well as his prior departure from the apartment complex immediately after the shooting, as signs of deliberate action. As the trial continued, court officers enforced strict security measures. Media access was limited to official updates, and all statements involving Jackelyn's children were kept confidential. Closing arguments were scheduled to begin after the final round of witness testimony. With the evidence laid out and legal teams fully engaged, the case neared its most critical stage: deliberation and verdict. After several days of testimony, presentation of evidence, and legal arguments, the courtroom moved into its final phase. The judge issued instructions to the jury, emphasizing the importance of evaluating facts over speculation. 12 jurors were sequestered to begin deliberations in private, tasked with determining whether the case met the standard for a murder conviction under Texas law. Deliberations lasted just over 6 hours. Jurors requested to review specific pieces of evidence, including security footage and forensic reports. They also revisited the testimony of the medical examiner, who had outlined the extent and location of Jackelyn Wilson's gunshot wounds. The weight of their decision was visible as they returned to the courtroom to deliver the final ruling. The foreperson stood and addressed the judge. The jury had reached a unanimous decision. Howard Ruffin was found guilty of murder. The courtroom remained silent as the verdict was read aloud. The judge thanked the jury for their service and immediately scheduled the sentencing hearing. A conviction at this level carried a potential sentence ranging from decades in prison to life without parole. At the sentencing phase, victim impact statements were permitted. Jackelyn's mother addressed the court on behalf of the family, describing the permanent loss they had suffered. A letter written by one of Jackelyn's children, read aloud by a court advocate, expressed confusion and sadness over the loss of their mother. Each statement was recorded into the official court record. The defense requested leniency, arguing that Ruffin had surrendered voluntarily and had no prior convictions of violent crimes. However, the prosecution maintained that the premeditated nature of the act, the presence of children at the scene, and the disregard for a protective boundary warranted the harshest penalty allowed under the law. After reviewing all submissions, the judge issued a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court noted that the punishment reflected the gravity of the crime and the irreparable harm caused to Jackelyn's family. Ruffin was. The final chapter of this story does not end with a sentence or a courtroom ruling. It lives in changed procedures, improved policies, and survivors who now recognize their own risk through Jackelyn's experience. Though her voice was silenced, the lessons drawn from her life and death continue to shape how others are protected, supported, and remembered. What could have been done to prevent this? Have you ever seen warning signs like these in your community? Should restraining orders be more enforced after breakups? That's a wrap on today's case. But the story doesn't stop here. There are countless voices still unheard, stories still in the shadows, and truths still waiting to be uncovered. Here at True Crime Diaries, we're dedicated to digging deep, exposing the facts, honoring the victims, and keeping their memories alive. If today's case opened your eyes, just know more powerful stories are coming. Stories that will make you pause, reflect, and ask tough questions. Hit subscribe, like this video, turn on notifications so you're always first to know when a new case drops. We post regularly, and what's coming next is something you won't want to miss. Now it's your turn. What stood out to you in today's case? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. Until we meet again, stay informed, stay alert, stay safe, because justice begins with truth, every voice matters. Every story deserves to be told.